Number 10. Hathor. The goddess Hathor was originally created by her dad, Ra, as a destroyer of men. She was supposed to punish all those who were disobedient to him. But then Ra was like, nah, I don't really like that idea. He just kind of changed his mind and decided to make her the exact opposite. Instead, the goddess of love. But she kind of loved killing men, and like even he couldn't stop her. So one night he gave her what was supposed to be a mug of ale, but actually made it like a special kind of blood, and she got so drunk off of it that she got too tired out to kill anymore and therefore became the goddess of love. Drunk in love, am I right? Her cult was centered in Dendera, where she was also seen as the goddess of fertility and childbirth. When the Greeks occupied Egypt, they compared her with the goddess Aphrodite. But unlike the voluptuous woman Aphrodite was depicted as, Hathor came in 3 forms, and I bet you can't guess which. She was depicted as either a woman with a cow's ears, wearing the headdress of a cow, or just a cow. Moo. Number 9. The beginning of the world. What an inventive way to imagine the beginning of things. I mean, the Big Bang is still pretty crazy too, but hey, here we go. Freaking love how much magic is in these stories. Like, I'm in, because that's all there was at the beginning of the universe according to the ancient Egyptians. Just swirling darkness, chaos, and magic. Heka, the god of magic, was the only thing that existed, waiting for the opportune moment to begin. Then a hill showed up called Ben Ben, and out of which the god Atum erupted from. He was lonely, so he mated with his own shadow to give birth to 2 children, Shu and Tefnut. Shu gave life, Tefnut gave order. They left their father to build the world, but they were gone so long he took out his eye and sent it to search for them. In the meantime, he just kinda sat there contemplating eternity all alone. He was really sad. This guy sounds like Zeus mixed with Eeyore. Anyways, his kids came back and he was so happy he wept tears of joy, and out of which were born men and women. They also brought his eye back, so that was nice. Number 8. Light as a feather. So unlike a lot of religions we've heard of, there wasn't really a concept of hell in Egyptian mythology. It was either you were worthy of heading into the afterlife or you weren't. Mat was the goddess of harmony and supported the belief that if harmony was disrupted, it must be restored. Every ancient Egyptian myth in some form follows this format. But the most important role she played was in the afterlife. When the soul left the body, it would appear in the Hall of Truth in order to stand judgment before Osiris. The heart would be weighed on a golden scale against Mat's white feather. If the heart was heavier, it would be devoured by a monster and the soul would disappear. If it was lighter, then you could go live in eternal bliss. So instead of several layers of burning torment, souls in Egypt instead faced eternal darkness and unconsciousness. The idea of non-existence was more terrifying than being cut up by demons. Number 7. Osiris and Isis. Okay, so we aren't strangers to deities being a fan of incest. It was kind of like how they multiplied, and ancient Greeks were okay with it kind of, but they kind of weren't. Anyways, the Egyptian gods were no exception. Isis and Osiris were 2 of the 4 children of the goddess of Nut. Isis and Osiris were married and actually really in love. They dug each other. When Osiris rose to the throne as the eldest sibling, his brother Set was pretty jealous. So he took the life of his own brother, cut him into little pieces, and scattered them all over Egypt. He really wanted to make sure the guy was dead. But then Isis wasn't someone you wanted to mess with. She had great magical powers capable of restoring life. She collected all of the pieces of her brother/husband and breathed life back into him. Osiris returned to life and they made all the love and then soon conceived a child named Horus. However, Osiris couldn't return to the land of the living, so he had to stay and rule over the underworld. So his son Horus was left to get revenge, and we'll get to that later. Number 6. Anubis. Now, I think in Western films that depict ancient Egypt, like The Mummy Returns, the god Anubis is often associated with the underworld. You know, that creepy half-man, half-jackal creature who appears to walk out of your nightmares? Like, he's so creepy. Well, he did used to run the underworld until Osiris took over, but he was actually the god of mummification and the afterlife. So, not wrong, but not the whole story. Anubis was the son of Nephthys and Set. Well, kind of. Nephthys actually never conceived the child with Set. She kind of had the hots for Osiris. So she disguised herself as Isis and made love to him that way, and then Anubis came to life. That may have been one of the reasons Seth attacked Osiris in the first place, as his suspicions rose. But it was actually Anubis who helped Isis piece together Osiris, creating the first mummy. Fun fact, During the Greek rule of Egypt, Anubis and Hermes were seen kind of as the same, the people who ferried the dead to the underworld. Oh, sorry, and a point. Anubis was actually the one who weighed people's hearts, so he used the feather, the thing, you know what to do. He was responsible for doing that. Number 5, Horus and Set. Speaking of Horus, earlier, remember how I said Horus had to take over defending his father? Well, here is where this story begins. When Horus grew up to be a man, he pulled a Hamlet. He was like, "You killed my father, prepare to die." Thus a series of battles ensued, and one of the gods didn't play fair. Set kept cheating at everything and continued to come out as victor. Not surprising since he didn't earn his way on the throne, he killed for it, kind of like a certain Claudius. Eventually Isis stepped out to help her son/nephew overcome her brother. She set a trap for Set, but after some pitiless begging for his own life, she let him go. Horus was pissed, so angry some of the other gods got upset that he was so angry. They agreed to compete in a final boat race, and Horus was like crushing it. He was doing really well, he was about to win, but then of course Set cheated by turning into a hippopotamus and attacked the boat, therefore claiming victory once again. Osiris finally showed up and declared that no man should take the throne through murder. So Horus took the throne. Why Osiris didn't just settle the whole deal from the beginning is confusing in itself, but hey, kinda reminded me of the eagles that showed up at the end of Lord of the Rings that could have saved like 3 movies, you know? Kinda like that. Anyways, let's move on. Number 4, Ra and his boat. Ra is one of the most revered gods in Egyptian mythology, especially since he was the god of the sun. He was depicted as a man with the head of a falcon. That kind of makes sense. He was once the greatest of all gods, but had to take a step back after he got too old and tired, and especially considering his task, I can see why. His job was to drive away darkness and sail across the skies, delivering light wherever he went. But at night, he would dive into the underworld and have to cross 12 gates. 12 hours, an hour per gate. After paying his respect to Osiris every night, a giant snake named Apophis tried to attack and swallow the boat. Every night! Poor guy, no wonder he got worn out. Every day it got harder to defend, and even one night, Apophis succeeded, but could only hold the sunlight for so long. She threw it up, which explained solar eclipses. After Set was cast out after the whole nephew battle, he ended up serving Ra in his boat and kept the snake at bay, but there's something confusing coming later that I think you'll agree is very confusing, so here we go. Coming up next we have Bast, number 3. Have you ever had a cat look you up and down and kind of like expect something? Like worship, you know? Are you a cat person? Dog person? Let me know in the comments. Well, that's because cats were a big deal in Egyptian mythology. They even had their own goddess. Bastet was a cat goddess depicted as a woman with a cat's head. Cats had a meaningful role in ancient Egypt as they protected their food from rats and snakes. They were even seen as family members, and to harm one was punishable by death. Legend says that sometimes cats would enter burning buildings to save their families. If they died, the goddess would bring them back to life, hence the idea of cats having 9 lives. There it is. Now here's where things get confusing. You know that story I told about Ra? Well, apparently Bastet was in the boat with him as well. During the day she would ride with him, and at night she would turn into a cat and then defend the boat from Apophis the snake. But I thought that was Set. So many conflicting things. I saw like a couple different stories who said each thing was different, so who knows. Number 2, Geb and Nut. Yet another sibling partnership, we have Geb and Nut. They fell deeply in love and could never be separated. They were that couple who would like constantly be like, oh my god, stop, right next to each other at dinner, you know what I mean? Geb was the god of the earth and Nut was the god of the sky. A previously mentioned god, Atum, found their union inappropriate, so he pushed Nut into the sky far away from Geb. He just didn't like being a third wheel. Geb and Nut were close enough to see each other, but could never hold each other again. And she gave birth to Osiris, Isis, Set, and Nephthys. Some say Horus too, but I don't think that's true. Number 1, the treasure thief. Okay, I don't know how I feel about this story, okay? This doesn't really feel like harmony is in balance, but anyways. The treasure thief ends in a way I really didn't expect, and I'm not sure you will either. Long ago, a great pharaoh with a wealth of riches decided to build a pyramid in which to keep them safe. One of the builders was wise to his plan and decided to find a way to claim them for himself. He built a stone vault with a hidden entrance covered by a slab so he could get to the riches. But unfortunately, he fell ill before he could return, so he told his sons of his plan. The sons headed to the pyramid in the dead of night, following their father's order. But, unbeknownst to them, the pharaoh had laid booby traps and one brother was caught in one. Not wanting to be found or interrogated, revealing his other brother, he told his brother to chop his head off. Ugh, that he did. Loyalty? I don't know. The pharaoh, upon finding the body, hung it up in the town square in the hopes of like weeding out whoever's it belonged to. But the other brother, being so clever, got the guards drunk and stole back his brother's body in the dead of night. The pharaoh was like, I'm not even mad, I'm just impressed. He gave the thief a pardon, summoned him to the square, and gave his daughter to marry him. Yeah, dude, you tried to steal my jewels? Don't worry about it. Have my daughter, because you're so talented at your job. Great work.
Starting off in our number 10 spot, we have ambrosia. Said to be the drink of the Greek gods with a flavor of honey, this beverage was delivered to the Olympians by doves, and this is what gave them their immortality. This is an important substance in mythology that is seen many times. Sometimes in the stories, people were given the privilege of drinking it, like in the story of Heracles, but sometimes others would try to steal it, and like we learned before, do not anger the gods or else you'll find yourselves punished like Tantalus, forever trapped, hungry and thirsty, standing in a pool of water he can't drink, under fruit he can't eat. Some mortals in the stories were only teased with the possibility of immortality, just to be turned away at the last second, like the hero Tydeus. He was going to be made immortal by Athena the goddess, but then she caught him eating human brains, so she decided, probably better to not. Mythology is weird. I didn't make this up. In our number 9 spot today, we have the Holy Grail. Before I dive into this one, guys, please don't forget to hit the thumbs up button if you're enjoying the video so far. The Holy Grail is one of the most well-known pieces of Christian mythology. It is said to be the cup or bowl that Jesus drank out of during the Last Supper. Of course, people were trying to get their hands on this relic, and to make it even more revered, it is said to be the vessel in which Joseph caught his blood while he was on the cross. That's heavy stuff, and it's the reason why King Arthur and his knights traveled in search of the Holy Grail. Here's the catch with this thing though. Only the purest souls were able to grasp it, and not many of us can admit that we're the purest of souls. This is why when only one man was able to touch it, it is said that he gained immortality through it. If that was me, I'd tell him to prove it. I mean, real easy to say it when you're the only one who can touch it. Just saying, proof or it didn't happen. Legend says the guy's still eating Mr. Noodles out of it to this day. In our number 8 spot today, we have golden apples. We hear a lot about the golden apples in Greek mythology, but in Norse mythology, they're actually quite an important and often discussed item. The golden apples actually need to be continually eaten by the Norse gods in order to maintain their immortality. The apples also supplied the gods with their strengths as well as their forever youth. The orchard that contained these apples was looked over by the goddess of spring, Idun. The apples are extremely important to the mythology, and in one story, when the goddess gets tricked into giving herself and the apples over to Loki, the gods immediately grew old and weak, but luckily she was returned and everyone's youth was restored. This led people to search for these golden apples at one point, but even if you were to find one of these magic apples, you'd need a constant supply in order to maintain your immortality, and that might be a little bit more difficult than you think. In our number 7 spot today, we have the mushroom of immortality. As early as 475 BC, there are written records that reference the mushroom of immortality, which was a key ingredient in the elixir of life. The lingzi, which is translated to mean supernatural mushroom, is the oldest known mushroom to be used medicinally, which is super cool. According to the Book of Han, people who were masters of esoterica, alchemists, and magicians known as the Fang Shi knew the secret locations on a mountain where these immortality mushrooms grew, but no one else did. This resulted in several Qin and Han emperors to send large expeditions to search for the mushrooms of immortality, but to no avail. While these mushrooms are still used in traditional Chinese medicine today, it doesn't seem as though anyone has been able to actually achieve immortality from them, but maybe we just don't have the correct recipe anymore. In our number 6 spot today, we have Nicholas Flamel. If you're a Harry Potter fan, you've definitely heard this name before, but did you know that the character is actually based off of a real person? Nicholas Flamel lived from 1330 to 1418, and he was a successful French bookseller. What's curious, however, is that about 200 years after his death, there began to be texts that surfaced that were attributed to him. According to these texts, Nicholas had learned secrets of alchemy from Jewish alchemists while traveling in Spain, and it is said that during this time that he acquired the original copy of the Book of Abramelin the Mage. It was then claimed that Nicholas was the one who held the elixir of life as well as the secrets of transmutation, and it was also claimed that he was probably still alive somewhere. Wild stories aside, What is in that book? Clearly people believe that there must be some immortality secrets hidden inside. In our number 5 spot today we have anger a Greek god. Many people generally look on immortality as a good thing or as a positive. In fact, it's well documented throughout history of people trying to achieve immortality. But in the times of ancient Greece, it was sometimes given as a punishment. In Greek mythology, there are plenty of times where a god would get mad at a mortal and the punishment would grant them everlasting life, but that included a punishment that would literally never end. Like the perfect example is the mortal king, Sisyphus. He was always trying to be a smart aleck and he would often attempt to barter with the gods rather than simply bow down to them, and at that point all the gods were super fed up with him. In the end, they eventually cursed him to live forever in Hades, where he has to continuously roll a boulder up a hill. Once at the top, the boulder rolls back down and the process repeats. Legend has it that he is still pushing the boulder up that hill to this day. In our number 4 spot today we have cinnabar. Cinnabar is the common ore of mercury and it has a long history in ancient cultures, but of course there's one big issue with it. It causes mercury poisoning. This is exactly why it's super strange that this is the central ingredient to the Taoist elixir of immortality. The elixir, which was called Huandon or the reverted elixir, it was believed that certain materials such as cinnabar or gold, when ingested, would instill some of their qualities into the body and rid the body of any imperfections that caused mortality. Of course, we now know that unfortunately, most of the precious items in this elixir were highly poisonous and they ended up doing the exact opposite of what they were intended to do. Many people died, including Tang Dynasty emperors, and it is said that this is part of what caused the shift from trying to find outside substances to create immortality to finding a way to harness one's natural energy in order to gain immortality. In our number 3 spot today we have Amrita. There is a collection of Vedic hymns called the Rig Veda, and according to these Hindu hymns, Amrita, which is sometimes called Soma, is a drink that can give someone immortality. Rig Veda 8:48-3 says, quote, "We have drunk Soma and become immortal. We have attained the light the gods discovered. Now what may foeman's malice do to harm us? What, O immortal, mortal man's deception?" While Amrita and its consumption by humans has been well documented throughout history, the knowledge of where to get it has been lost. It is believed to have been some sort of plant or fungus, and the instructions for the preparation of it involved things like pounding parts of the plant into paste or to release its juices. It would sometimes be filtered through wool and then mixed with cow's milk before being consumed. Amrita was often said to have been found in mountainous regions, but despite there being such detailed accounts of its use, the true identity of it has been lost, and now sometimes ritual prayers will include an apology to the gods for the lack of Amrita. In our number 2 spot today we have eating a mermaid. This is definitely on the top of the list when it comes to the strange. In Japanese mythology, there is a mermaid creature known as a ningyo, which is described as a cross between a carp and a monkey. These creatures lived in the sea and they usually brought bad luck and stormy weather with them, and if one washed up on shore, it was thought to be an omen of war. This leaves me wondering why anyone would ever want to be near one, but as legend has it, a girl known as the 800 Nun, one day her father accidentally brought her the meat of this creature and she ate it and was cursed with immortality. It was called a curse because she was horribly sad for many years after having to watch many husbands and children of hers pass away, which, like, yeah, that would be an absolutely terrible part of immortality. After being horribly sad for many years, she decided to devote her life to Buddha and become a nun, and in the end, because of her holiness, she was allowed to pass away at the age of 800. I guess maybe immortality isn't as attractive as some of us once thought. In our number 1 spot today we have the Philosopher's Stone. Turns out this thing wasn't just a Harry Potter relic, it was based on a real thing people believed could grant the power of immortality. It has long been believed that the Philosopher's Stone could be made out of ordinary substances that exist everywhere, but we just don't have the information needed in order to recognize them. This is why in the first Harry Potter movie, Voldemort is searching for the stone. He's trying to find a way to live again and he thinks the stone is the key. It is thought that this may have been created by a man named Nicholas Flamel. Yes, we just talked about him. Yes, he is also a character in Harry Potter and he was also a real person.
Number 10, Pandora's box. I don't understand. Why would you even have a box like this in the first place? According to Greek mythology, the beginning of the earth was free of pain and suffering. The land was perfect, kind of like, exactly like Eden. Prometheus had created man by making them out of clay, and he will, okay, well, we might get to that later in another list, but you know, he did a whole bunch of good things for man, the gods got mad. Anyways, Hephaestus made the first woman, Pandora. They gave her beauty, cleverness, charm, and Curiosity. Curiosity killed the cat. Her name translates to all gifted. But then Zeus was like, you know what would be a great gift? I'm gonna give this girl a box and tell her not to open it. That's like putting a B-Day present in a 4-year-old's lap and being like, ooh, enjoy the wrapping. No. Well, guess what happened? Because they gave her curiosity, it got the best of her and she released all the troubles into the world. Disease, violence, madness, greed, old age, death, plague, slow walkers, and people who eat really loud at the movies. Okay, the last thing to leave was hope, so at least that's a good thing. But you gotta wonder, who in the heck let Zeus be the leader of everything if he made a crap decision like that, with no foresight at all? Why put that stuff in a box? I don't know. Stop it. You're fine. Number 9. Echo and Narcissus. Look, there's nothing wrong with doing a fit check before you leave for work. Give yourself like a, ooh, damn, you know? Do that. Love yourself. But if you're stuck there for the whole day, there's a thing called being a narcissist, which is derived from a character in Greek mythology named Narcissus. The love story between Echo and Narcissus is a curious one, which makes very little sense. Echo was a beautiful nymph who was cursed by Hera when she tried to protect Zeus from getting caught because he was swing. She was now only allowed to say the last word anyone said, hence Echo. Echo was just one of many who pursued Narcissus, but her love was deep and true. One day, as she waited for him to say the last word, she finally went to him when he called her. Immediately, he spurned her off, saying like, no one's better than me, so get out of here, you nymph. You called her, dude. The goddess Nemesis wasn't pleased with his behavior, so she decided to punish him. Nemesis lured him to a steady pool of water where he spotted the most beautiful thing he'd ever seen. Himself. And he fell passionately in love. Stung by the pangs of unrequited love at last, Narcissus took his own life rather than live without being able to touch himself. Moving on. Number 8. King Midas. Whoever used the term Midas touch and thought it was a good thing needs to read the story again. The Midas touch is an allusion to King Midas, who thought having the power to turn everything into gold was gonna be a good thing. But he didn't specify, and there's always a catch. There's always a catch. After Midas welcomed with open arms Dionysus's merriest reveler, Dionysus said he would give him one wish. He wished to turn everything he touched into gold, because he needed money. He was delighted at first, turning twigs and plants to gold, but then when he got hungry, he found he couldn't eat or drink anything without it turning into gold. Panicking, his daughter ran towards him to comfort him. Out of instinct, he hugged her back because he was a hugger. She soon turned into gold. Dionysus heard his curses and prayers and told him he must wash himself in the river Patroclus. Now, whether everything turned back to normal is debatable. Some stories say they did, others didn't, so there is some confusion there. But either way, Midas learned to appreciate all the things around him as opposed to wanting more. Morals. Number 7. Daedalus and Icarus. We all wanted to jump off the roof when we were kids with wings made from paper to see if we could fly. I mean, why not? Massive metal planes are able to do it, why can't we? Literally, planes are insane. Side note, because science, that's why. But with stories like Daedalus and Icarus, a part of me still thinks it could work, as long as you don't fly too close to the sun. Daedalus was a master inventor who designed the maze for King Minos' palace. He, along with his son, built it together, but the king tricked them and trapped them inside. Daedalus was said to have earned his skills from Athena herself, and soon he fashioned a pair of wings with wax and quills. Soon, father and son were able to flee, but Icarus ignored his father's warnings of flying too close to the sun, otherwise the wax on the wings would melt. Soon, this happened and Icarus crashed into the sea and died. It's a marvel that the wings worked in the first place, but it's even more of a miracle that they evaded the Minotaur, who was like, by the way, inside the maze that they built for it. Also, no one explained how they broke out of the maze in order to get into the air into the first place, so I'm not sure how all this worked. If my parents said I couldn't jump off the roof with fake paper wings, then it only makes sense that this would fail, I guess. Number 6. Apollo and Daphne. Ever had someone like not get the hint and continue to slide into your DMs? So in order to avoid them, you like have to turn into a tree so they leave you alone? Ha! Anyways, yeah, me too. It's a tough place to be, especially in the case of Apollo and Daphne. Apollo made the massive mistake of making fun of the god Eros, who, you know, the guy with the arrows that make people fall in love, Cupid. Well, in order to mess with him, he shot a golden arrow at Apollo, causing him to fall desperately in love with the nymph Daphne, and at the same time, Eros struck Daphne with a lead arrow, causing her to detest the god. Apollo pursued her with such fervor that Daphne eventually got exhausted running away from him, so she prayed to the river god Peneus to rid him from her. So she sacrificed her physical form and transformed into the laurel tree. Desperate measures, folks. Apollo was so distraught, he made her his sacred plant and always wore stems of the laurel tree on himself, which means he would have had to break them off the branches. Which, if you're thinking about that, did Daphne feel that as a tree, you know? Did he just keep causing her more and more pain? Ugh. Number 5, Chiron. I think the last video or the video before, I don't know, my brain is pretty scrambled, but I mentioned the story of how Ixion made love to a cloud and gave birth to half horse, half men people. Yeah, well, as confusing as that is, like, where did those genes come from? Chiron was an exception to the rule. He was the son of the bond between Titan Cronus and a nymph and became a kind of honorary god. Unlike his other horny relatives, Chiron was a trusted, artistic, and intelligent being. He was still part horse, but his front legs were still human. So I guess imagine a man wearing half of those like 2 men horse costumes. Yeah. He didn't play the field, really, but was married to a nymph named Charicolo and had 3 daughters and a son. He trained fantastic heroes such as Achilles, Jason, Perseus, Ajax, and Heracles or Hercules. But his most noble act was giving up his mortality in order to free Prometheus. As a reward for his sacrifice, he became a fantastic constellation in the sky. Number 4, Delphine. The most confusing thing about Delphine is actually what she was supposed to be. A python, a dragon, and some ancient accounts equate her with Echidna, the mother of all monsters, a half woman, half snake being. She has also been confused for a male serpent, but according to the earliest Homeric hymn, she was a girl dragon. Anyone get that reference? No? Okay, moving on. There are quite a few different accounts of the goddess, and descriptions of her aren't really consistent, but we do know that she was a dragon type thing born from Gaia, the Greek goddess of earth. Her name means womb, and only us ladies really understand why a womb would be depicted as a dragon. The time of the month, I know. Delphine was given the charge of guarding the Oracle of Delphi. For some reason, Apollo really wanted to control it, so Delphine and him went head to head on several occasions. He eventually slew her with his bow, allowing him to take control, so unfortunately that happened. But hey, he's a god. Number 3, Medusa. The origin of her story has a few versions, but no matter what way of getting there, she ends up as a gorgon. Her hair full of snakes and armed with a petrifying gaze, Medusa is one of the most prominent figures in Greek mythology. The story of Medusa has come under some confusion recently. Some say that the god of Poseidon took her without consent, violating her oath to Athena, and therefore the goddess punished her. Some say it was consensual, some say that she just insulted Athena somehow, but this is the most popular story. Medusa, as a mortal woman, was said to be the most beautiful woman in the world, but remained an enchanting and steadfast priestess for Athena. Though at first Athena was proud of her subject, she became irritated that the people were only at the temple to see her, because she was fire. Poseidon didn't like Athena because she won Athens, so he tried to seduce the young maiden to get her angry. She refused because she's awesome and ran to the temple and prayed to Athena for protection, which the goddess gave her none, so Poseidon took her anyways. Athena punished her, saying it was her fault, though like, obviously it wasn't. Where the heck were you, Athena? Bad move. You'd think Athena would be half decent in this situation, but guess not. So she turned her into this ferocious gorgon, and then on the way out of the temple she ran into her best friend and turned him into stone and a whole bunch of other people. It's a really sad story. She wasn't a monster. I don't think so anyways. Number 2, Pygmalion and Galatea. We talked about Narcissus, and this story is kind of in the same vein. Like, you know, you fall in love with your own work of art. The world is wide and strange, and people marrying cars and objects is actually far from myth. It's actually happened, but like why? How? No clue. Which brings us to the strange tale of Pygmalion and Galatea. Pygmalion was a sculptor and carved incredible lifelike ivory creations. His dedication to his craft left him no time for love and even swore to a life without wedlock. But this longing one day manifested in a statue he carved of a woman of unparalleled beauty. He could not take his eyes off his creation and named her Galatea. He clothed her, decorated her, kissed her. The guy was obsessed. The festival of Aphrodite was approaching and he prayed and prayed she would come to life so he could marry her. Aphrodite, upon seeing the sculptor, was awestruck by her beauty and agreed. As you can guess, though unlike most Greek love stories, they lived happily ever after, which is unfamiliar for the Greeks, honestly. So many tragic stories. Greek tragedy is a thing. Number 1, last but not least, Io and Zeus. Yet another reason to be wary of clouds. I honestly don't know how the gods made love via vapor, but some things we will just never know. Io was a follower of Hera, and Zeus, upon seeing her one day, fell hard in love or in lust. Depends. She constantly avoided his lustful attempts until one day Zeus decided to take what he wanted by surrounding her as a cloud and making love to her without consent. Which is, for some reason, a word I can't say on YouTube, but you get the point. Hera figured that out, turned her into a white cow because she was mad, tied her to an olive tree, and had her guarded by a 100-eyed dog. Zeus then sent Hermes to get rid of him, which he did, but then Hera released the cow Io and plagued her with madness as she wandered around. While wandering, she met the poor titan Prometheus, who was cursed to have his liver torn out every day, and he comforted her by saying that she would one day return to her human form and bear a child by Zeus that would someday release him. Zeus caught up with her in Egypt, turned her back to human form, then her descendant, like 11 generations later, Hercules, released Prometheus from his chains. But wait, I thought that was Chiron. What?